First of all, I must compliment you on genuinely being provocative and raising questions that confront all of us. So I'd like you to get a big round of applause from the audience. For giving us a reality check and also a vision of what the future could be. We were having that chat just before we came in, and you said two things. You said you were in Nepal yesterday for your market visit, and you met some consumers, and you asked them what were the last 3 ads they remembered, or last 5 ads they remembered, and they couldn't remember anything recently. And then you asked them, tell me any ads that you remember, the last 5 ads. And you said that they told you that they remembered a Lux ad in which Sridevi came. And you made a comment that consumers see a lot, remember nothing or little. If this is what is happening, what is your expectations from your agency partners, from your communication partners? And is it scary from an advertising spend standpoint?
No, I'm saying if this is not scary, I don't know what is scary. I have to say this is not the first time it has happened, but it was even more stark yesterday when consumer after consumer I asked the question as to, do they watch advertising? Yes. Do they like it? Yes. Did they see it yesterday? Yes. Tell me the ad which you saw. Blank. And when I pushed in the last week, in the last month, any category, they struggled to talk about more than 3 to 4 ads. And when I asked them to describe it, and as has just been shared with you, some of them talk about this Lux ad, which was a Sridevi ad. I don't know when we ran that ad. 1 or 2, of course, it wasn't all bad. They did get a few ads right. But in general, it was a source of acute concern. And I think you put it quite well. Consumers see a lot, but remember nothing. And I ask myself the question, why would that be? It simply is because we are ceasing to be relevant. We are ceasing to say something to them which they wish to remember, which makes a difference to them and to their lives. And I think some of it is also because I just fear that over a period of time, a little bit of cynicism has crept in terms of how consumers start decoding advertising. And credibility of conventional advertising like this is going down. They are becoming smart enough to realize that these are manufacturer-driven messages which are going in. And consequently, this is the outcome that we see. And unless we are really, really understanding what that consumer need is, and insight, and are able to present our communication in a manner which touches a chord and engages and entertains them while doing so, we are not going to be heard. We just have lots of advertising which is becoming like wallpaper today, and that's a scary thought.
I'm sure by the end of the day we'll have some solutions, and I'm sure your agencies will send you a very fancy consulting assignment to be able to tell you that. Another thing that you said outside in the room, and you said that you were in Lucknow a couple of days back, and then you were in Chennai. And what surprised you was in small 2,000 strong village, or 2,000 could be a less number or a large number depending on what category you're in. But for the category you're in, 2,000 is a small hamlet.
Yeah.
You said the aspirations of the consumers are such. You met a lady who said, she uses Lux, but only on her body, on her face, she uses a face wash. So if that's what's happening, do you think the agencies of today are equipped to connect with those consumers in rural areas? Do marketeers understand that?
So I think, firstly, I just want everyone to realize that while I have at one level deliberately and consciously been provocative and given a sense of the challenge and the impending issues that we are faced with, I also want to realize that life is not all grim. There are some fabulous opportunities that we are going to see ahead of us, and I'll talk about 2 of those opportunities and what it means for us. The first opportunity is the one which you referred to, which was in a village about 70-80 kilometers of Lucknow. When a consumer was asked what she used to bathe with, and she said Lux or whatever, but like you said, but only on my body, on my face I need a face wash. Couldn't believe what was being heard. And this was an experience which my colleague Gopal Vittal experienced when we went there. We all go out to markets, we all go out to small villages, and the reason we do so is because we may believe that because we are Indians and because we understood India and we are still in touch. But the reality is that change is happening so rapidly around us that we could be stuck in time and with some assumptions of what India and Indians are and what rural and rural consumers are and lose the plot completely. This was one such example. The second example was when I went to a village in off Tamil Nadu, in Tamil Nadu, off Coimbatore. And we went to that village, again, 1,000, 1,500 population, a lady, and with an interpreter, I was asking some questions and she was responding. And I saw through the corner of her eye a sachet which was hanging close to, in one corner. And I had that sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach that something horribly wrong is going on. And I looked more closely and I went there to see what it was, and I discovered my worst fears were coming true. That it was a sachet of a comfort fabric conditioner. And I just dreaded what might have happened if she'd used it. So I asked her, do you know what that is? She looked at me and quite strangely said, of course I do, that's a comfort sachet. And in my mind, I had this thought as to, she's bought something thinking it's a shampoo sachet. She'll apply it on her hair and will be deeply, deeply dissatisfied with that experience which she's going to get. But she wasn't. So I asked her, what did you use it for? And she looked at me as if I was the strange man who didn't know what all this was about. She says, what else do I use a fabric conditioner for my clothes? Well, why would you want it? She says, it gives a great fragrance and it smells so good. After I wash my clothes, it makes the whole experience wonderful. Now, this is my personal experience. And I promise you, if anyone else had told me about this, I would have said, you're bullshitting. Yeah. Indian consumer. And I know that I would have been guilty of saying that, yes, we will launch it, but keep it in the metros, keep it for modern trade, maybe class 1 towns, restrict its distribution. That's my notion of India and Indians and what would be happening in rural. Now, a large part of that may be true, and I don't think it's the case for us to be going and distributing it in 1.5 million outlets. But it also tells us how rapidly consumers are changing. And I keep saying there is one huge role that media has played in all of this. And the reason I believe a tipping point has come just now is because almost everyone who's getting into the consuming class today are people who've been born and brought up after 1980. And in the 80s, we saw a very fundamental phenomenon, which is the advent of mass television, mass advertising, etc. started off. So there is a generation who are now coming into the consuming class who have not seen the India of yesterday, who have not seen shortages, who have not seen lack of choice, who have not grown up post-independence, which was the earlier generation where austerity was a virtue. They haven't grown up like that. They've grown up differently. And with television advertising beamed into their homes, aspirations rose. You could have been rich or you were poor, you still saw the same advertising. And therefore, rapidly aspirations became homogeneous. Means, however, in this country have remained heterogeneous. And that's the challenge for all of us. But I see a tremendous opportunity. I see an opportunity where consumption will start rising. And it will start rising for the reasons that I've talked about, because more and more people have this deep desire to fulfill their aspirations and feel good in those little actions, through those little actions and little moments that they take.
You said one more thing, and you put it in different words. I'm using different words, and I'd rather get you to say that. You said we are looking at the containers of the future from the slime of the past. And you talked about a certain classification that your company uses in terms of mapping consumers in there. How do you see that change?
I think the first thing that I've begun to realize, and indeed in our company we've begun to realize this, is that we had a way of looking at consumers. In the past we looked at only what we called socio-economic indicators, and we found that they were not adequate to fully explain consumer behavior as we saw it. Basis that, we moved to a new norm, a new methodology, which was called living standard measures. And the living standard measure was simply saying that we would look at a combination of things like income, education, but also look at real buying behavior in different categories to predict what a consumer like this is going to behave. And therefore we classified consumers. And I think what we are now beginning to see, that even a living standard measure, in theory a living standard 3, measure 3, LSM 3 consumer, should behave very similarly anywhere in the world. That's what the definition was. But I think what we are now beginning to realize that there's a new dimension of youth where we are observing that LSM3 20-year-old consumer is starting to behave in many categories like an LSM6 consumer. And that aspect of attitudes which is now going to possibly force us to rethink of LSMs in a manner in which we have not. And I think that's a very, very important thing. I think the youth in this country will be another driver of change in the manner that we've not seen before.
Fantastic. Now, in your presentation, you talked about that everything soon would be digital and sooner than we expect. So there's no point in compartmentalizing digital media versus mass media, because if that's what it's going to be. How do you view this in the sense that today we are at 4%? When will we get to 10, 12% or 15%? And second, related, it's great for somebody like you who's a thought leader, whose company is a trendsetter and pretty much determines the dynamics of the industry that we are in, saying this at a forum and where industry leaders from the fraternity are present. But when you talk to your brand managers, when you talk to category heads, sometimes while this thinking is there, while this realization is there, they are not putting money in digital.
No, I agree with you. So firstly, I don't know when it will get to 10%, by the way. I have absolutely no idea. I have also no idea about the future which I talked about, whether it will unfold the way which I described. I just painted a scenario and asked this audience to reflect on what could happen if that scenario were to be true. Are we geared up and ready for it? That's point number one. Point number two, I completely agree. Why my brand manager? I myself am guilty of trying to extrapolate the future based on the recent past. And it is a big challenge. And I remind myself time and again, and in our company I keep reminding ourselves, and I think people are all seized of the issue, as indeed everyone here is. But the fear and the things that keep me awake at times is maybe we are not being bold enough in the manner in which we are foreseeing the future, and we could all be caught napping if it is faster than we think it might be. But I have no view as to whether it will be this faster or not. I fear that it could be faster. That's my feeling. And I don't know. We are trying to say that we will keep doubling our spends, tripling our spends every year. Is that good enough? I don't know. So that's really, so I'm in the space of inquiry and challenge and really seeing whether we can find answers to this.
I can tell you that their communication partners in some way dovetail your thinking. I was reading Mr. Sakuja's interview on Exchange for Media 3 weeks back, and he said, the area that his agency would like to grow because their clients' needs, and you're a large client of that agency, is digital. Put more monies there, have more insights and understanding there. And you showed the Burger King example. I mean, that's very bold. It challenged the whole notion of Facebook. So in India, I was in Cannes 2 weeks back and looking at the advertising that is happening there, it was my personal view that the advertising here is very timid. It's, maybe it's a cultural thing. It's not hitching it to big ideas. It's, there is a Lokpal bill thing happening. There is corruption, anti-corruption movement, but the ideas are not big enough. We are still looking at very incremental ideas, very transactional ideas. So not being bold enough, is it a cultural thing in India?
I'm going to be timid and not answer this question. No, I think, look, I don't know. I don't think it's cultural. I think there will be cases when people have been bold. But good ideas, you must recognize, are not easy to get. They're simple in hindsight, but they really require you to be intimate with the consumer and find something. And when you do, I think people will get there. And I think we must all challenge ourselves to find some of those as we move forward.
You talked about good ideas and you talked about the prosumer. One of the phenomena that company like yours is leveraging very well in UK is crowdsourcing. Yeah. In terms of finding those ideas from the wisdom of crowd, from consumers. But in India, I don't see levers doing that much crowdsourcing. So maybe I'm ill-informed or less informed, or is that something that you look?
I think we are doing some of it. We've started, there are a couple of examples I can think of. We've got, I think in ice creams, a brand called Cornetto. Cornetto Love Reels actually went out and in possibly one of the largest crowdsourced digital talent hunt that we carried out. We identified a large number of people,